And now, Rate That Album, Season 3, with Paul Muad'Dib and Joe Fremming. Two guys who know stuff. Hi, and welcome to Rate That Album, the back and forth podcast about music albums and reviews with myself, Paul Muad'Dib, and my good friend, Joseph Fremming. Joe, how you doing, buddy?
Paul, my balls feel like a pair of maracas.
Did Lucille mess up your mind, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. She does that to people. Yeah.
Better at the Jack in the Box, Paul.
The Jack in the Box. Yeah, that's what happens when Mary left you, right? That was right after you quit going to the Christian youth organization. Am I right
church social.
Mm-hmm.
Church social organizations.
Yeah, with Father Riley, I remember him. Yes, we are doing Frank Zappa's Joe's Garage. Before we even jump into it, Joe, I got to apologize. I was going through and doing some of our podcast editing, and the last couple of episodes, there was two things that stuck out to me, both my fault. Number one, there was a popping sound that sounded like someone was snapping their fingers. I have been vaping and didn't realize that it's the sound it makes when I play with my vape. That's this little click. And so that's on me. So that's going to stop. You won't have that going forward. And last episode, especially for some reason, my words were kind of slurred. And that's on me as well. I have been battling bronchitis and have been on cold meds. So I was not drunk. I wasn't anything like that. It literally was the cold meds that we were getting some slurring. So I apologize for that, my friend.
Don't worry, Paul. I was on so much heroin. I was nodding out. So
good for you. Did you put on a diaper and put on the sitch? So Joe, we're getting into some. I think we've done a lot of bands over the years that have a lot of fervent fan bases. I think getting in the Zappa, we are tapping into probably one of the top 10 that if we get things wrong or do things or say the wrong things, we are going to get jumped at. So I want to nip this in the bud right away. You and I talked a little bit about this offhand. I think outside of Juggalos and a few other bands, there's not one that's as passionate about their fans that would be of a band other than Frank Zappa. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, when I I worked in record stores for 10 years, two different ones.
Mm-hmm.
I hated talking Frank Zappa to Zappa fans because they're enthusiastic, which is nice. Mm-hmm. I like anybody's enthusiasm, but it can be kind of toxic too. Zappa's fan base really over the years turned me off of a lot of the music, I think, after a while.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have like this mentality that if somebody doesn't like Zappa, they don't get it because they haven't listened to like 20 of his albums.
Yep.
I'm going to tell you right now, you can probably listen to 2 of his albums. You'll know either you like it or you don't.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
I'd say at least 2. I'm not going to do the 20, but he has such a wide variety. I would say start with Joe's Garage.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like this, maybe try one of his classical albums.
Yep.
Classical music albums. If that doesn't do anything for you, you're probably not going to like them. So
I want to dig in on this because there's a couple of things that are happening here that I believe is part of the problem with the toxicity when it comes to Zappa's fan base. Number one is exactly that. Is Frank Zappa has, and I want to make sure I got this right, and as of 2021, he has a total of 119 albums. Now, I'm sure that's gone up.
In his lifetime, I believe it was like 50 he released, which
62.
62. That is, a phenomenal amount of output from one guy. To put out 62 albums in his lifetime and then 57 after he passed away. So this guy, Zappa started in 1966 with an album called Freak Out, which both you and I have said that we're fans of. Yeah, I'm a fan of. I basically, we'll get into it. I only really like 2 Zappa albums. I've heard a lot, before people jump,
I've heard it. I knew a guy when I was in high school. He'd play me Zappa all the time. I heard a lot of. I heard Hot Rats, Weasel Screech, by whatever the face, Civilization face, like all this shit. I've heard it. A lot of it's not for me. I only like Freak Out, and I only like Joe's Garage.
So, yes, and I think we know the same guy. By the way, older gentleman.
The Happy Hippie.
The Happy Hippie. We know the Happy Hippie. Yes. Yes, he was a great dude.
No, he wasn't. He was a piece of shit.
Oh, okay. All right. He was a piece of shit. Fair enough. I didn't have a problem with him, but, there you go.
I can go into details about how much of an asshole that guy was, but...
yeah, let's do that off air, though. So, in preparation for this, I wanted to get a lot of things right, and I know I'm going to get some of it wrong. I consider myself a Zappa fan. I like several of his albums, and I'm actually going to get ragged on by some of the fans. And this is something that I saw even I was going through Reddit boards on Frank Zappa. And one of the things I saw was, well, if you like this album, as a matter of fact, I'll just say it. If you like Apostrophe, Joe's Garage, and Shake Your Booty, you're not a Zappa fan because you didn't listen to Zowie Wowie and Sofa number 1 and 2, and you didn't get into Zoot, and people were like, well, wait a minute, no, you need to get into Shut Up and Play Your Guitar, and You Are What You Is, and Chunga's Revenge, and other people were going, well, the stuff with the Mothers of Invention was better than this, like this, and there's all these weird factions of it. And what people I think need to realize is, and why this is happening, is that Zappa was I will equate him to the Hunter S. Thompson of music. This is a guy who was just out there and really stream of conscious, but was really, really, really talented. I mean, he was a composer, not just a musician. And he knew world music. And he would go to jazz, and he'd go to rock, and he'd go to reggae, and he'd go to Moroccan, and he would travel the world, essentially, musically. And so that would be, I think, one of the big things is, so you have people that maybe and I was looking at this stuff, I'm like, well, this is all the jazz stuff that Zappa did, and this is all the rock stuff that Zappa did, and this is all the reggae. So you have that. The other thing is politics, just like Hunter S. Thompson.
Yep.
There's a lot of glorifying and misunderstanding of Frank Zappa's politics. Would you agree with that?
Thing. Yeah, well, the thing is, like with Hunter Thompson and Zappa, I will say that both were very contradictory in their politics, which is like everybody on Earth. Like everybody has their politics, and it can be contradictory. I watched before this review. I watched the Alex Winter documentary on.
Oh yeah.
And like that was a lot of the things like they talked about. Like he was so fervently anti-drug and all this stuff, and he would treated band members so bad. But he would take a blind eye to people he liked more with that stuff. Like it's just like everybody has these idiosyncrasies, and Zappa is one of them, and Thompson, I think. And people just latch onto what they think this person stood for, when really nobody besides the actual individual really knew. It's a mess. And with Zappa fans, I watched a reaction video.
Okay.
Like Jamal. I shared that with you.
Yes.
Jamal's one of my favorite reaction guys. He's like this guy who just takes requests and he'll listen to music, and man, I was like, the review's good. I remember what I said, the review's good. Look at the comments.
I know. It was crazy. You had all these people going, well, what about this? What about this? And I want to nip this in the bud right now as well. We are not going to do another Zappa album. We have been making it a very good point not to go back. There are so many other artists and so much other out there that really what we're going is we're just doing a snapshot of an album and kind of discussing a brief introduction, as it were, to the artist for you guys to, listen to what we're saying. And hopefully, I even if we recommend it or don't, I hope you're at least checking out the music and the stuff that we're talking about, whether we like it or not. So that way you're broadening your musical horizons.
And frankly, this is his most accessible album, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Again, I haven't listened to all 120 of them, but I've listened to like probably 30 or 40 of them in my time. This is probably his, for me at least, this is his most coherent.
It definitely is more straightforward, I believe, in that case. Yes.
Like the songs I think are strong. Stronger, and it's like I don't think it's the fan base really soured me. And if you're upset listening and hearing that, like, I'm sorry if I offend you, but it's what it is, man. People, it's
legit.
It's like, fandoms are like that. Like, you get, especially when you get into Zappa's politics. This is a guy who was going to run for president before he died.
Yep.
He was in front of the PMRC. He was, if you're going to pigeonhole him at anything, it'd be libertarian.
Yep.
He was not woke.
No, he was not. And let's dive a little bit into that, because I do see a lot of people on both sides. For whatever reason, we have to politicize things. It's just the world we live in, and it's the way Reddit is, and it's the way forums have become. It's just deterioration in my point of view. And actually, Zappa would be absolutely appalled at where things have gone.
Well, from everything I've read from Zappa, if you liked his music, great. If you didn't, it was no big deal to him.
No.
But it seems to be a big deal to his fans.
Yeah.
Like, he could care less if you like, oh, okay. But if you liked it, yeah, he was probably happy you enjoyed his music,
Which is weird to me, because Frank Zappa fans also, I think, are really, really guilty of gatekeeping, right?
Oh, yeah, they've always, it's again, when I worked at the Electric Fetus, it'd be like, somebody bringing up Zappa, I was like Switzerland, I was neutral. Like, no opinion.
Yep. And I think
I want to go down that rabbit hole, man.
I think that was a smart way to do it, especially when you're in that space, right?
Yeah, you can't leave.
Yeah. No, I do want to.
They can, but they're not gonna.
There's a couple of things that we can say about Zappa definitively. He started libertarian, he was Republican, and by Ronald Reagan's presidency, he had changed himself to be a registered Democrat. So whether you like it or not, those are the facts about it. Zappa, when people bring up, he was on CNN's Crossfire saying, I'm a conservative. You may not like it, but that's what I am. But then you see him going against what they were conservative, which is essentially the start of libertarianism. Also, Zappa, and we'll talk about it in one of these things, he was, there's terms and things that he was using back then that, people are kind of claiming now. A very, very fascinating individual in terms of just how unchained he was and unabashed in what he did. And let's talk about anti-woke. One of the big things I also hear on him is Frank Zappa was homophobic, and that's not really the case. Frank is on record saying he really didn't care. It's just, as we've talked about with previous things, it was the time. It was more of what we talked about with NWA, right? It's just what you call people. It's what you did. It's what you compared them to if they weren't those things. As a matter of fact, he was a big fan of Barney Frank, and said he's a wonderful role model for the gay community. So, he wasn't in that way, but he definitely was not woke and was not afraid to throw things out there for just sake of throwing it out there. Would you agree with that, Joe?
Yeah, and people's views change. 65, not a whole lot of people were accepting to the gay community, so that's what it was. Like, I wasn't there, like, that's just how it was. Like, you can't change history, I guess.
Yep. And the other thing that people say is he was a womanizer. I want to pull up this quote of Zappa on this, where he says, women, there's more of a stigma to being a smart girl than there is to being a smart guy. Women need to stop making themselves stupid. And
but he was a womanizer. Let's not
mince words.
Let's not mince words. Like, he would have his wife buy penicillin pills for him when he got off tour.
Yep. I mean, yes. Let's call a spade here. But what I want to make very clear was it's not as insidious as people, I think, feel it was, or as outrageous as people feel it was, in terms of him being absolutely, what's the word I'm looking for? Absolutely appalling, or did not respect or terms of womankind and that type of thing. I think that has been blown out of proportion. I'm not forgiving him for bullshit he's done, but definitely there were nods in his interviews and things like that he was just anti-stupidity in general, and anything he felt was stupid, that invoked the ire of what was Zappa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, you saw the documentary recently. What do you want to put in that you know about Zappa before we get into the actual album itself?
I mean, I guess people could watch it themselves because, he was a weird guy who made weird music. He was a walking contradiction like everybody else. He didn't, he was jealous of other people's musical successes, while at the same time, he didn't even really go out of his way to try to be musically successful.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, he is, like everybody else, a bunch of contradictions in one person.
Yes, completely agreed. So basically, Joe, you got in that. I mean, he got a lot of his, you could tell, Zappa was an older guy at this point. I believe he was born in 40 during World War II. Yes, 40. And a lot of his influences was the jazz music of the time, which you can definitely hear throughout his career.
Jazz, R&B. R&B got him into playing guitar, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. So one of the
self-taught himself.
Yeah, he's self-taught. He's completely self-taught. When you look at that and what he did, and we'll get into it a little bit more on this album especially, that's really crazy. I strongly recommend, we had talked about Freak Out after I picked this album, and you're like, oh man, Freak Out. And Freak Out, I think everyone should listen to, because it was put out in 1966, and when you hear the lyrical content and the musical content, that is what really, when people say Frank Zappa was ahead of his time, I really think that's what they're zeroing in on.
Yeah, because it's a year before Sgt. Pepper and Piper at the Gates of Dawn, but it's very much in line with what psychedelia became. Before it was really picking up.
Yep, which is interesting because, again, Zappa was very anti-drug, which is just hilarious. And you look at the lyrical content. He was talking about the downfall of America in terms of economic status long before people were. Really, really interesting thing. He lived in New York for a while with the Mothers of Invention, which is kind of important because a lot of Frank Zappa's work and lyrically is a running theme of it is being very autobiographical. He wrote about what he knew and what he went through. Of course, we get into things, you can look into this yourself, but he hung out with Captain Beefheart.
Yeah, Alice Cooper.
Yep, Alice Cooper. He reformed the Mothers. He started getting in the films, 200 motels, excuse me. And wasn't he on he was on the Monkees at one point, which is
he's in the movie Head.
Yep, he's in the movie Head, which is wow for the Monkees. Interestingly enough, in 1971, he got injured. An audience member guy was pissed off that his girlfriend was enamored with Zappa on stage, that the guy knocked him off into an orchestra pit and crushed his larynx. And Zappa thought he was not going to be able to sing again. He was in a wheelchair. for almost a year. And that is why when you listen, there's kind of this vocal change in the 70s. That is something that really occurred there. And actually, there's a brief period there where he only did instrumentals. And one of the big reasons why was because of the crushed larynx and the change of his voice. So he was relearning, this guy, again, relearn how to sing, essentially, after that. There was problems with Warner, which gets mentioned in this Joe's Garage album. He starts his own label in 1979, which is when this album came out, with Shake Your Booty. And then this one, he got really political in the 80s. He was one of the 3 big people in the PMRC battles, which I think is fascinating because he got to the real root of it, which was attacks.
Yeah.
And no one else was going there. And Frank Zappa called them out 100% on what that is.
Yeah, he was pointing out that it's like they're infringing on people's First Amendment rights in order to protect children from ideas, shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite lines from that is when he says they were dealing with dandruff by decapitation.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, right? Like, again, there was this thing to him, and I think, regardless, we had I don't think he ever would have made it in this presidential one, but I think he would have been interesting in terms of politics and advisory over the world. He eventually passed away of cancer in 1993. So, again, we're going to kind of get into that, but let's jump into Joe's Garage. And this is something that features prominently throughout the album, a recording technique that Frank Zappa was doing back in 1966.
Yeah, he was doing it on Freakout.
He was doing it on Freakout, which is called...
I don't know. Don't quote me on that, Zappa fans.
According to my research, he was doing it on Freakout, which is called Xeno... Crony is... I don't know how to pronounce it.
Basically, he's taken live recordings and like live solos and putting it in a different context, right?
Yeah, well, so it goes even beyond that. There's some really interesting. So you'd have like a beat where it's like 11/4 because he really liked 11/4s and some weird odd beats, and he couldn't do it live in the studio. But what he could do is essentially use this recording technique and snap it, like even like in the place, so you'd get this weird rhythm that would work. So you have like this 4/4 rhythm from the live recording to this beat that was going on. It was fascinating stuff.
I would honestly, it'd be interesting to see what he would have been able to do if he hadn't died with Pro Tools.
Oh my God. I think we'd all are we're all missing out on that. I think he would have been a real, yeah. I mean, there's some artists out there that have done some really cool stuff, like Imogen Heap, who's done some really cool stuff with musical innovation. But I think Frank Zappa had been around when digital and Pro Tools and that type of thing was around. Ableton, I would have loved to have seen what he could have done with it.
Zappa's splicing tape. Like, you have to be very precise. It's very time consuming.
Right. And this is the other thing that we'll get into when we get into the album. So let's just jump into it. I'm not going to go into, I don't think, I know I'm not. You can if you want to, Joe. Joe's Garage was released in 2 parts. It was released when Joe's Garage Act 1, and then about 6 months later, Act 2 and 3 came out together. And then later they put it all out together as 1, 2, and 3. There is liner notes. There is a story being told. There are people that are singing into it. I will just say that Fembot in a Wet T-shirt, which had a different name when it was released on the album versus when it came out in CD. For whatever reason, they changed the name. The announcer is Father Riley, who got kicked out of the church and is now working at this, radio station bar thing. So there's a whole list of like reoccurring characters and themes and things like that that's going on in Joe's Garage that is in the liner notes, and it kind of explains more of the cohesive story. However, We didn't dig into that when we did Lamb on Broadway, and I don't feel like it's fair to dig into it here because you can't see those liner notes anymore. And really, you got to look at.
I didn't even look at the liner notes because I listened to the streaming. I own the CD, but I didn't even bother looking at that. And again, I'm going to be the Tony Banks here.
Yeah, please do.
The concept is the weakest part of this album.
Well, and there's definitely a reason for that. So when they were doing Joe's Garage, it started with just being what Frank was doing for a while there, where he was putting out singles. He was putting out he was putting out 2 tracks, one an A, one a B, and putting them out in the tiny, whatever, like an A track or whatever, and throwing these things out there as singles. Well, they started working on Joe's Garage and Crew Slut. And Frank, when they're in there, was like, wait a minute, we got something here. And they started doing these other songs. And a lot of these songs are actually songs they are working on and performing live, years beforehand that Zappa was like, well, this could fit in here. And that's one of the big complaints that you hear from Zappa fans is it starts as this concept album about the end of music and goes into this weird sexual revolution thing and then gets back to the music portion of it instead of staying cohesive there. And part of that is Frank had all this material and was like, well, we can put this in here and we can make it like this and we can change a lyric here and we can make it part of this bigger overarching story. And I think Zappa went way overboard in terms of trying to create this story and lost the plot. I will completely agree on that.
Yeah, and it's it starts and then it just gets so stupid. The plot. If you're listening to this album, you're following it as like a concept. It goes into Stupidville, and it doesn't go back for me at least. That's why it's just like when I listened, first 3 times I listened to this with the concept going in my head. Then after that, I would just blank out during the central scrutinizer shit and just listen to the music, which is a lot stronger than the theme of this album.
Yes. So I personally feel that what was Act 1, but the first 8 songs,
which would have been just a fine concept album.
Yep. Right there.
It's after track 8. It loses me, man.
And
it's not because it's too weird. I fucking love weird shit. I love John Waters movies. Fuck it. It's not I'm not turned off because he's having sex with an appliance. It's just it's not cohesive with what came before.
On a particular Reddit forum I went at, there were several people that said when it gets to acts 2 and 3, it definitely feels bloated.
Yeah.
And a part of it is a lot of people believe that there was songs that just never made it to a Zappa album, and they just figured out a way to work it into this that they were doing live.
Cram it in there. Just cram it in.
Just cram it in there. I personally enjoyed.
Keep it greasy, Paul. Keep it greasy.
Keep it greasy.
Cram it in.
Yeah, I think that right there in Act 2, the side B, which is called the prison section, that to me is the part that loses me the most. I think he could have done something a little bit more cohesive about that because, again, just like the last album we did with John Lennon, I agree with a lot of what Zappa is saying here and kind of the story and the tone of it, but it's the presentation that fucks up. So the overarching story before we get into it is essentially there's a guy who starts off in a garage band doing music from the 50s and 60s, and they're doing well, and then they get pulled in the record business and the band can't handle it and they break up, and then there's the sexual exploits of what's going on about
the whole band part is just in one song.
Yeah, the whole band part's in one song, and then it goes to Joe.
If you think this is an album about Joe's band, no, it's done after one song.
Done after one song. Then it's just what happens to Joe after the music has ruined his life, essentially, and everything else, and then how music is ruining the life of those around him. This really came out, surprisingly, even before the PMRC. Zappa saw the writing on the walls with a lot of government and lyrical concerns, especially from the far right. Zappa was not a fan of church and religious interference on freedom of speech. He felt that it was very, very disgusting, was very against it, and really one of the big reasons why he, before he died, turned to Democrat was actually because Ronald Reagan brought out Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, who Frank Zappa saw as con artists and liars, and went, well, this is who the Republican Party is embracing. I don't want to be a part of it anymore. So that was the big thing, because you think about it, he was pissed off at Al Gore and Tipper Gore, and a year or two later became a Democrat. So that's how much he hated religion and things like that. So there's those tones there. Then it cuts to how he makes mistakes and ends up finding religion, getting fucked over by it, and then getting into prison, and then coming out and being completely broken. This is what Frank Zappa saw as the American average life. You start out doing what you want to do. You're optimistic. You do your things as a teenager. Then society shames you for doing what you wanted to do in your teenage years, in your 20s. You find religion. You make mistakes. You get beat down. You go to prison. You get put in institutions, etc. And they come out and you are a cookie cutter of what they want you to be. That was all what this album is about.
Except it's presented as a cartoon.
It's presented very much as a cartoon.
It's another thing I think really kind of chapped Zappa's ass, because he was always seen as like a comedy music.
Absolutely.
But he did it to himself. And that's another reason, like, I have struggled with Zappa's music. It's just like it. Like you said, it's based on his personal things, but I don't feel it because it's done in such a cartoonish way a lot of times.
Absolutely,
that's my opinion.
No, it to me, it's very much the Gonzo effect, right? That's why I equate it to Hunter S. Thompson.
Yeah,
what was real, what wasn't. What was the real exploits? It was this overly cartoonish.
Yeah, he tells a story and it's like a cartoon mixed with a 1950s, 60s B-movie sci-fi thing, which is like, it's fun, but it's not like something I'd want to sit down and listen to a lot.
No,
it's just how I am. But yeah, it's just, I mean, I'm sure it pissed him off, but he also did this. Like, nobody forced him to write "Don't Eat the Yellow Snow," man. Like, he did it.
Yeah.
Valley Girl.
Valley Girl. Although I think, Valley Girl, although it was trying to make a valid point, it was just done in a cartoonish manner. My guitar wants to kill your mama. Yeah. But he put out an entire
Catholic Girls,
which is on this one. Crew Slut, which is on this one.
Why does it hurt when I pee?
Yeah, why does it hurt when I pee when it's on this one? Dong Work for Yuta, which is on this one. A Token of My Extreme, which is on this one. Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. So the album, Joe, let's get into it. It starts with the central scrutinizer setting up the plot.
Yep. Like I said, the least favorite part of the album is the central scrutinizer narrative. Mm-hmm. It goes too long. I mean, this is 3 minutes of exposition.
Yep.
It's in the liner notes, so.
Yes. One thing I will say that I love about this album, and which is crazy, is because it was done independently in Zappa's own studio, which wasn't all that impressive of a studio from what I understood and saw. I mean, it wasn't like a shack, but it wasn't like the big ones. Frank Zappa had made some money, but he wasn't overly rich like some of the other musicians were. Is the production work on this album. I actually really, really, really enjoy Frank Zappa's production work on this album.
It's very well produced. He did very well with what he had. But this is a guy who would lock himself in the studio for days to get shit done, to the point where his daughter had to slide a note under the door saying, "Hey, I live in this house. It'd be nice to meet you."
Yeah.
Which resulted in Valley Girl.
Yeah, he invited his daughter on to do a song with me. Yep. Then we get
Central Scrutinizer sets up the plot, introduces us to Joe and how the government is very Minority Reportish.
Yep.
That they're enforcing laws that haven't been written yet. So you got some of that nice right-wing paranoia going.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And then we get into Joe's Garage, which is a nice 50s.
This is my favorite song on the album.
Oh, it's a good song.
I love this album because it tells such a coherent tale. What is it, 6 minutes?
Yep.
6 minutes. Yeah, you get a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's based off of, I believe, it was him and people in his band shooting the shit about how they started off getting into music.
Yep.
And playing, and so they he just threw this together, man. To me, this is one of those perfect songs where it just encapsulates it, and it's just man, I wish the whole album was as coherent as this.
Yes, I completely agree with you. What I love about too is it goes through the thing of time where it starts off kind of old timey, and then he talks about getting in the go-go and the styles and stuff that he does in 6 minutes, and kind of showing the flow of time with the changing of the style of music is
the details of the lyrics, setting up the, it was an old Dodge with a beat up door. You're getting imagery.
You're getting imagery. Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is very good storytelling, and he was a very good storyteller. At least, he was. I think he just took it to other levels sometimes, made for good or ill. But this song was it's probably my favorite in that of his, in that it's got such great imagery, and it changes, but yet still has that really catchy melodies.
D. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I do like how he makes fun of the record industry in this one. It wasn't a guy from a company we can't name, which was Warner. It was Warner. It was Warner. Let's just call it for what it is.
Some of it's a lot of biographical with the mothers of invention.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And, part of the thing with his prison was part of his stint when he was in prison, and how he felt being, withdrawn into himself while he was in prison, isolated. But we'll get to that. So, yeah, and then I do like, again, this was done on tape, and just the attention to detail, even when they're bringing in the SWAT team, coming in, the police, and the neighbor, this is a Karen, back in 1979, he used to cut my grass. He was a very nice boy.
She comes back. The neighbor comes back. And it's fantastic. And of course, he goes to jail, and what do they tell him to do? Go to church, do social activities, be a, this is part of that thing, and then we go little conformist.
Yeah, be a nice little conformist, which gets us into Catholic Girls,
which is, I love. This is another the first 8 songs on here are probably the strongest for me.
Yeah,
because after a while it gets jam bandy-ish, which I enjoy, but when it gets in the jam bandy-ish, then I just kind of stop paying attention to the concept, and it's not as strong material. But yeah. Catholic Girls.
Oh my God! So
the little mustaches.
I was going to say, there's no way to get around this. This is not woke at all. Right away.
Well, the next song too, man.
Oh, the next song.
That's the next song. I'll get into it, but that's probably the most problematic I have on this album.
Oh, I think we could even get the more problematic with Cyborg, but we'll get there.
Or Keep It Greasy.
Yeah, Keep It Greasy. We'll get there. Yeah, but Catholic Girls with their tiny little mustache, how they go in the rectory basement. Father Riley's a fairy, but it don't bother Mary.
Yeah.
Basically pointing out the stereotype that Catholic girls were sexually repressed to the point where they were putting out and having sex in order to get away from. I mean, this is just an old. If you know about it, you know about it. This was a thing, and I think it still is considered a thing.
Well, it was kind of when we were in high school. Catholic schoolgirls partied harder than most of the people at our janky ass school.
I can attest to that. I have stories I could tell off air. I cannot tell them on this podcast that I had with Catholic girls, and I can say that I don't think that there was, at least in my experience, and again, that's how stereotypes work, right? In my experience, this is what I experienced. I can't say everyone else did.
Did they have mustaches, Paul?
What's that?
Did they have little mustaches?
One did. One did. I'm not gonna lie, one did. So yeah, it gets into like, and again,
this was like a minor like single hit for him too, which is wild.
Yeah,
Joe's Garage. Joe's Garage was played on radio.
Joe's Garage was played on radio as well. And this was played on radio. And I think Why Does It Hurt When I Pee was played on Dr. Demento.
Yeah, I think that was like more of the FM of the 70s would play. 70s, 80s would play Why Did It Hurt When I Pee? College radio. College
radio, I think, still does. Yeah. So, and again, there's a lot of like characters and different voices in here. Again, in the liner notes, it explains who those people are. I'm not going to get into it. But yeah, this is essentially talking about how Joe does what society says and goes to this church and starts getting blowjobs from Mary and
impure thoughts, Paul.
And pure thoughts, think pure thoughts. And then we get to the next one, which is she doesn't show up to one night to the Christian Youth Organization, the CYO. And Joe, why is she not at the CYO?
Because she was sucking cock.
In the face backstage at the Armory in order to get a pass.
This song, he's trying to play both sides.
He is.
He's very much mocking this mentality, but I feel he's also punching down on Mary.
Correct.
And that kind of... I thought it was funny the first time, and like each time I hear the song now, it rubs me the wrong way.
I agree. I actually do.
It feels like he's mocking her, and it gets worse with Fembot in a wet T-shirt. I mean, it's just like, yeah, guys in the bands of this time were taking advantage, and women were sexual beings, and this shit happened. But it feels like he's really making fun of them, and which is hypocritical because he parlayed in these sorts of scenarios.
100%, Joe. And yeah, I mean, when he starts it off, it's like you can tell, it's, hey, all you girls in these industrial towns, you're probably getting tired of the local clowns. They never give you respect. They never treat you nice. So you try a little friendly advice and be a crew slut. Like, it starts off with him mocking the musicians, and then it flips over to him mocking Mary. So yes, he's playing it both ways, but it feels like, to me, it punches a little too hard, because Mary
punches down, which is I don't like punching down.
Yeah, no,
I'm not a fan of it.
No, I know you're not. I definitely know you're not. And I feel like it is punching down because Mary is played very cluelessly.
Yeah.
Like, she has nothing going on. But so you start to feel more about it, but you also got to look at the sleaziness of what the record person was doing.
Yeah.
But
it's a way of life.
It's and it's funny how he's pointing out the band Toto for this, by the way. it is in the line notes. The band it's Toto. It's Toad O, which and I actually had to look up what a Telefunken U-47 was. I thought it was like some kind of like submarine. No, it was a revolutionary microphone from. So that's why it looks just like a Telefunken U-47, which I did not realize it was a microphone made in the 40s. Did you know that?
Nope.
No, I had no fucking clue either. It's a rough one.
And it followed by an even rougher one. So Mary was enticed away from Joe by an evil barbarian with a wrench in his pocket, lured into a life of sleazery, and she needs to get home. And to get home, she decides that she is going to do what, Joe? Wet T-shirt contest.
Wet T-shirt contest.
Going off for mammalian protuberance.
Mammalian protuberances.
Which is like such a dork way of saying tits.
Yes. I So yeah, Mary's dumped after basically it says in the liner note.
I mean, they didn't treat Mary well.
They didn't treat Mary well, and again, I don't want to get into it, but basically the band dumps her off, and now she's trying to get money.
Yeah, she's mocked again by it's the priest, right?
It's the priest. Yep, it's the priest.
Like joking about how she's getting raped in the tool shed by her dad and shit.
Yeah, but I also want to point out that he's also punching at MCs at this time, that he did not have a lot of respect. This was part of the way a lot of these, the way you listen to the way he does it, he's like, like making fun of what was radio and people like this at the time. Yeah. So, yeah.
Still punching down though.
Oh no, I completely agree. He's punching down. Because he, and he's pointing out, I think also in this one, the fact that people are getting excited about a wet t-shirt contest and just how ridiculous that is.
It is ridiculous.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Because he points out in this lyric, when the water gets on them, on their nitties, get on them, their nitties get rigid, looking so pretty bold. It's a common reaction that makes it an attraction whenever it's cold. And he points out it's a common reaction. Like something as benign as this is getting the fellas out of control. And he's kind of making fun of them by saying, I think it serves them right. I know you want someone to show you some tit. Big ones, wet ones. And then you get the whole speaking thing and the kind of the solo and Mary trying to get home on the bus.
Yep.
Which is where, we get which is get into the solo aspect of it. Where we learn that Joe is devastated and starts dating a girl named Lucille, who he meets at the Jack in the Box.
He falls in with a wild crowd, Paul.
Falls in with a wild crowd. He leaves the church, which never should have done, but it's Joe's fault for leaving the church. And again, Frank Zappa's very poignant on that. It's Joe's fault for leaving the church. And he falls in with a rough crowd and starts dating Lucille. Or not even dating, but just fucking Lucille.
It just has like a one-night stand or something.
Yep. Yeah, it's like a one-night stand, which leads us to, Joe.
Why does it hurt when I pee?
Boom, boom.
This song is hilarious. This is a song that's going to go on a mix of mine.
Yeah, yes. I love this song.
It's so stupid. It's such a stupid song about getting beady.
It is. And the story goes that it was someone like a roadie or someone on the team. That was something that came out of their mouth, like just kind of was like, "Hey guys, why does it hurt when I pee?" And Zappa wrote a song about it.
Well, again, Zappa had gotten BD from tours too, so that's not like he was unfamiliar with the results of these sorts of things.
Absolutely, I love this song. I don't want no doctor to stick no needle in me. It jumped right up and grabbed my meat. I got it from the toilet seat.
Yeah.
My balls.
You didn't get it from the toilet seat, Bubba.
Yeah. That was the old
urban myth. You could get it from a toilet seat.
That was the old urban myth. Yep. You Hubbard because you could get it from a toilet seat, and his balls feel like a pair of maracas because he's got the gonococcus. Yes.
See, this is like this song I love, and again, it's the irreverent, fucking stupid humor that really I probably gravitate more with Zappa stuff.
Absolutely no.
Like you can do like the most sophisticated or weird or whatever, but like, why does it hurt when I pee, man? And like Joe's Garage,
and I will admit, there's a lot of songs this album I can't play in front of my kids. I did play this one, and they giggled their asses off because they don't know what he's singing about. They're just hearing "Why does it hurt when I pee," and it just sounds funny to them, right? They have no idea.
Yeah.
So
I always hope they don't know.
yeah, I could really be failing at parenting right now, or being a genius, however way you want to look at
we
it.
were little, we knew. So,
When we were little, we knew we did, but that's because we learned about in the back of the playground.
Yeah.
We had the fat kid in the back of the playground that taught us everything. Yeah, I also love his voice on this song. Like, it's actually, he's singing this very, very well for these ridiculous lyrics that you think he wouldn't. And something that I do criticize some of his other albums for is when he is being goofy, he tends to sing pretty goofy and
does that weird Dylan thing.
does that weird Dylan thing that he does. And he doesn't do it.
It's a way of life.
It's a way of life. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And then it goes into Lucille Has Messed Up My Mind, which I also really love this song. It's too pretty for what it is. It's such a gorgeous song. And to me,
honestly, this is where the concept album should have just ended.
And I think there's a satire here that was lost on people in this song. Because to me, when I listen to this song, I think, man, Joe, you had a one-night stand with this girl. She gave you BD, and you're blaming her for tearing up your heart and saying how much you need her. Like, I look at this song and I go, Joe's the problem.
Yeah, he absolutely is the problem.
Joe's absolutely the problem. I could see where people would listen to this, though, and be like, oh, man, yeah, Frank Zappa gets it. Like, oh, man, no, this isn't like a good breakup song. This is Joe being a fucking creep.
Yeah, he's blaming somebody else for his. He made the this is like Zappa, doesn't like stupidity. People should be responsible for what they do, sort of guy. This is what he's saying.
This is you nailed it.
Joe is the asshole here.
Joe is the asshole.
Didn't do anything wrong.
Nope. No, in Zappa's mind, Lucille did nothing wrong. This is on Joe for being a fucking mess. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, Lucille, she did put a gun to Joe's head. He went out and found her, He went to the Jack in the Box.
He went to the Jack in the Box. That's his fault. That's why we don't have Jack in the Boxes in Minnesota, because you get VD. Put that on your tagline. Someone put that on Twitter. Take Jack in the Box. Next, now, so that's album 1, Act 1, and Joe, if it was just that, I would say, and I would tell people, fucking Act 1 is great. It really is.
Act 1, I think, should have just been the album. Honestly, I don't think we needed Act 2 and 3. Act 2 and 3 really don't. In my opinion, don't really add a whole lot. It's just him kind of. I feel like it's padding.
I feel like part of it's padding, but I also feel like there was Zappa wanted to say more about the music, because part of what was going on at the time is Zappa had a really major concern, because in 1979 the Ayatollah had taken over Iran. And this is what people forget. Like, music was getting banned and religion was going through there. People forget, like, you could go back and look at pre-1979 Middle East, and you will see women running around in Western clothing.
Yeah. The Iranian Revolution was hijacked by the religious extremists. It was when, these kids... pissed off about the Shah. Mm-hmm. Rightfully so. The Shah was not a good person, but they sided with the wrong people.
Yep.
And it's
been a problem.
Been a mess ever since.
It's been a mess ever since.
It was like Iran pre-79 was a modern, not a good place, but at least it was modern.
It was modern. Yeah, it was. It was a modern place.
It was. The religious extremists were in the minority.
Mm-hmm.
They were mostly, outside the cities, but, again, to overthrow the Shah, they kind of made a deal with the devil, and that's what happened.
Yep. So, no, completely. And this was one of the things that Zappa was one of Zappa's big inspiration for this album. Again, the people forget the timeline and think that this had a lot to do with the PMRC. No, this had to do with the fact that the Middle East was banning music. And Zappa was concerned that that religion was going to spread out. And that kind of, rightfully so, very prophetically, thought that...
Yeah, look at today.
This is what he saw leading down the road. Like, he saw what was happening today back in the 60s and the 70s through other things going, oh my God, there is people within the political parties that are going to look at this, emulate it, and push to have this happen. And look at where we are. We have border agents stopping people from Australia demanding to know if they've had abortions or not.
It wasn't just going on in Iran. I think I don't know enough about it, but based on one of the characters, I think he saw what L. Ron Hubbard was doing down in Florida, basically taking over an entire city.
Hence the token of my extreme, Joe. Lead us right into it.
L. Ron Hoover.
L. Ron Hoover, the first church of appliantology. The white zone is for loading and unloading only. I actually like this song.
Yeah, it's all right. Like, again, this kind of like, it's funny, like, whenever people talk about the band Fish, what I actually like, they're like, oh, man, they're a Grateful Dead ripoff. Like, no. Their jam music is more in line with Zappa than it is with the Grateful Dead.
100%. Oh, man. Joe, yes. Thank you.
Like, they sound more like stuff on Joe's Garage than anything the Dead ever did.
I completely.
Because I was listening to this, I'm like, God, this feels like when I went to a Fish concerts. This is what Fish kind of. They stole this sound.
So I did a short-term gig at the college radio station in our hometown. And it was volunteer. I wasn't paid for it or anything like that. And
Park, California.
What's that?
In Canoga Park.
Yeah. Canoga Park with Mary. And I would, like, I was working one of the night shifts and I needed a pizza. So I ordered a pizza, and when I knew it was coming close to getting delivered, I put on Adam Hart Mother, followed by David Bowie by Fish. So you had like these two like 20-some minute tracks, so I could just sit and eat this pizza and not have to worry about running the booth.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of like classic rock DJs do that with Inagata Vita.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know your comparisons to Zappa and Fish, and you're right on.
Fish has covered Zappa's songs too, which is they're more. Yeah, we'll get to Fish at some point, but
I'm looking forward to that. We'll get there sometime. So, so Joe decides he's got to get back into religion, and the central scrutinizer is like, "Hey, this is what you need to do." Basically, making fun of born-agains. This is what Zappa is doing. And
via Scientology.
Via Scientology. And so he goes to the mystical advisor who tells him that he has a latent appliance fetishist. And
this is like, again, it's so stupid. It's so fucking dumb. And basically, further along, he has an appliance. He starts having sex with it. Has like fucking dildos all over. Short circuits it by peeing on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just like, oh yeah. I mean, it kind of loses me here, Paul.
No, I get it. We're going down this rabbit hole together, buddy.
I like to figure I'm pretty open-minded and all that, but here I'm just like, what the fuck's going on?
So I'll try. I'll try to tell you what I'm seeing, because I think this is almost, I mean, I wouldn't compare it to the reverence that we had for Twin Peaks, but I think there's different interpretations that you can have with Act 2 and 3 of Joe's Garage.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I personally, so when he gets to the point where he's saying, "Oh, what's my problem? Tell me what can you see?" And the mystical advisor, "You have nothing to fear, my son. You're a latent appliance fetishist." And Joe's going, "That all seems very, very strange. I've never craved a toaster or a color TV." And The mystical advisor, a latent appliance fetishist, is the person who refuses to admit to him or herself that sexual gratification can only be achieved through the use of machines. Get the picture? You're telling me I should come out of the closet now, Mr. Ron? No, you must go into the closet. That's where they all live.
I could see this as where people would be thinking he was homophobic.
Right, and it's not. And the closet is a. I mean,
it's.
Yeah, I get it, right?
Giving a golden shower to a robot's a little over my head now, Paul. Like,
well, and we're gonna. I have theories on this,
but like it feels. Yeah, it's. I don't know. I can see the argument where it seems like he's diminishing.
Yes, I can completely see the argument there.
But like, I don't know if that's what he's going for because I really have no idea what's going on.
So I look at this as more of. When he says, hey, mystical advisor, what's my problem? And the guy tells him, this is your problem. And he goes, I don't know if it is. And then the mystical advisor is like, no, it is. And he's like, oh, okay. Should I, like, he's really looking at Scientology and like the mindset of people going to religion where they're going, you know, oh, I'm trying to find religion. And then these religious figures are saying, this is what it is. And they're going, I don't think so. But because they have the authority and this mystique and this clout, and they're going, no, I'm telling you, this is what your problem is. People are buying into it and doing things and falling into things that isn't them because this is what they're being told to do. That's what I feel like is happening here. Right?
Yeah, I'm following. So where does the dildo toaster come into play?
Well, we got to get to that because the central scrutinizer, Joe learns how to speak German.
A government-issued sex robot appliance.
Well, he goes to the closet, which they have these appliances that really go for a guy dressed up like a housewife who could speak German.
Yeah, this is part of a song that's all sung in German.
Yep, so Joe learns how to speak German. He goes to this place and he sees these kitchenette machineries that dance around with each other, and he sees this one that looks like a cross between an industrial vacuum cleaner and a chrome piggy bank with marital aids stuck all over its body, and he bursts into song.
I don't think that's not a term used a lot these days.
Which means dildo.
Marital aids is just a nice way of saying dildo.
It's a very nice way of saying dildo, which is funny coming from Zappa and just how blatant he can be with his lyrics. Then we get to Stick It Out, Joe, which is partly in German, which is something that Frank Zappa has done. Sofa number 2 is mostly sang in German, and Zappa would, as he'd go around and do world tours, he would actually sing parts of his songs in their language. Really, really, again, smart guy. So we get
Beatles did that. They even released singles in German.
Good point. Because German, for whatever reason, it's the syllables. From my understanding, it's the syllables that translate well. It's not necessarily the words, but it's the syllables.
Because I think Monty Python also had they filmed scenes in German too.
In German.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely they would. So we get Fick Me, Die Miserable Horizon, Magic to Swine. I love that. Ryan and Rouse. So you don't know what's going on. And then we get the robot in a robot voice saying, pick me, I'm clean. I'm also programmed for conversational English, which we learn what Joe has been saying. Fuck me, you ugly son of a bitch. Magical pig, make it go fast, in and out. I'm sorry, I find this hilarious. This is a song that was, I'll be honest, was kind of thrown in here. This was one of those ones that he did that he did on stage. This is one of those songs that he did on stage and was kind of thrown into this thing. This leads into how I feel this song and the next song is the repression. Because Zappa was very clear. He felt that until people got over the religious stigma of sexuality, we were never going to have a real sexual revolution. It was always going to be this cookie cutter. Even the BDSM is everything's the same. There is nothing there. And so I think
you don't know that until you've golden showered on an appliance.
Fine, I'll piss on my toaster later tonight and tell you how that goes for me, Joe.
Oh God. Oh man, we're so canceled.
I know. So this leads to them going to Cyborg's apartment, because apparently robots in this world.
Yeah, again, this is like a lot of this shit. I was following along with the first 8 songs, and then this is classic Zappa, where then he'll lose me for like a large chunk.
And I think this is a part that loses a lot of people. I'm not even going to try and deny that. So then you get Cyborg, which leads us to this, which is them in the apartment. I could see this one being more of the argument of him being, where people would say, homophobic.
Well, if you could understand what the fuck was happening, yeah.
Well, so you know, and he talks like later, you know, you can bloke me, and he goes, I shared this apartment with a modified gay Bob doll. He goes, all the way. Ever tried oral sex with a miniature rubberized homo replica? No, not yet.
Yeah,
I love that part. Not yet. And
Joe's just open to whatever.
Joe's open to whatever. And so I gotta admit, though, when he starts singing Blowjob, it is gorgeous. I'm not even gonna lie, like, it is really well sung. Blowjob. I can't even do it without laughing. Like, how the fuck he did this on tape is beyond me.
Yeah, well, he fucks up the central scrutinizer stuff, but he does this straight face.
He does this all straight face, you know. Then we get to the part where he's bluking too hard, and you know he's getting into the bondage and humiliation, and we find out that the golden shower must have turned on his master circuit.
Yeah, he destroys the poor robot.
Yeah. And I must have bluked him. Hey, do that.
Oh God, there's like, you know, musically and all that. This part doesn't work for me, but I'd love to see John Waters make a movie out of the second part of this.
I would love to I was gonna say, I want to see someone make a movie out of this album. Like, if any, make a whole movie out of this fucking thing. There is content galore here. No,
nobody would watch it, Paul.
Fuck you. I'll buy 20 copies of it.
That'll make up for the multi-million-dollar budget. They got $80.
Good thing Paul bought 20 of these fucking.
we made 500 or 80 million budget back.
Hey, I have producer credits on IMDb, sir, for a Bret Hart movie, so I'm willing to put producer credits on this one. So one thing I will say, there is 2 things with these songs that I think is really fascinating to me. Number one is he's talking about the word jizz. Back in Cyborg, or back in Stick It Out. Don't get no jizz on that sofa. Now, what's really fascinating to me is jizz was not a well-known term, to the point where Star Wars, when George Lucas was asked what style of music the band is playing in Mos Eisley, he called it jizz music. And I'm not kidding.
Show me the lie, Paul.
So you can that's a true statement. Look it up. Star Wars Wiki, jizz music. Like, don't go. Wikipedia, jizz music. It's what it's called. It's called jizz music. And the other thing that he brought out was this term that people think is new, and it's like when Bootsy Collins was calling people baby mama back in 70s albums, when he talks about this being an XQJ37 nuclear-powered pansexual roto-bluker. Pansexual is a term that's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And people think that it's this new concept.
Oh.
And it's
based
not.
Off Pan.
Yeah. Yeah, it's based off
Greek or what?
Yeah.
Some sort of mythical creature, but yeah, it's based off Pan.
It's based off Pan. Yeah. And so I think this is really fascinating. And again, you could sit there and make the argument of, well, now he's using the term pansexual. So was he really homophobic, or did he not just give a shit? And he's just saying whatever he's saying. And I always kind of, that's
I
one
feel
of those
like
things.
he just didn't give a shit.
I feel like he did.
I think he was too smart to be homophobic. But then again, I should assume that he would have been too smart to be misogynistic. But people are complicated. We've seen
that. We've seen that, and I do believe that people can change on a topic. I don't mean like for political purposes or for like getting out of trouble. I mean genuinely turn around on ideas. I mean, to be totally blunt, I was raised in a very, very, very religious conservative home, and I turned around my complete way of thinking on a lot of things that were drilled in my head. So, I mean, you can definitely make actual changes without it being cynical. Speaking of cynical, Joe is in jail for pissing on the pansexual.
Yeah, they arrested him.
They arrested him.
Remember, this concept album was about music.
Well, Joe was sent to a special prison where they keep all the other criminals from the music business.
Yeah,
the ones who
snorting
get caught.
detergent.
Yes, snorting detergent and bluking each other. And while he's there, he meets this guy who used to be a promo man for a major record company called Bald-Headed John, Ken Warner, King of the Blukers. And we get Father Riley singing the song with these former execs. Boy, Joe, I cannot explain to you why Dong Work for Yuta is on this album. I can explain Stick It Out. I can explain Cyborg. I other than its fact that there was the central scrutinizer saying that the song is about someone being in prison, there's nothing else in the lyrics that talks about it, really. And again, you get to you get that part where now you go, John's got a sausage that will make you fart. I mean, again, is he just trying to be humoristic? Is he taking a dig? You just don't know because it's juvenile.
Yeah, you don't know, and he's dead, so we can't ask him.
We can't ask him.
And granted, if you probably asked him, he wouldn't even tell you. So
no. So yeah, this one's a weird one. Outside of the central scrutinizer coming in and explaining things, there is nothing here other than the bookends of the start and end of the song that explains that Joe's in prison and he's getting fucked in prison. Which
a lot of some anal sex going on here.
Well, and
anal rape, if you will.
And I do think Zappa was also very critical of the prison system. And I think that this was something that he was like, you don't hear about as much going on in terms as it was then, where there was, you do, but it was more like this, as we talked about, like with Lennon and things like that. Prison systems were very different than it was there. And a lot of it was, unfortunately, like women in prison movies, like, Caged Heat and things like that, except take the women out. Yeah. And this was the way a lot of prisoners, basically the wardens and the people were using rape as a means to control the prison population. Let's just call it what it is. Yeah. So
they let the inmates enforce.
Yep.
Yeah. Like if you ever watch HBO's Oz, they kind of go into that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really one of my favorite shows.
It's a great show, and it
kind of really hits home like the issues we have with the prison system, and that show's 25 years old now. So
right. God, is it that old still? Oh,
yeah, 97, man.
Wow, Jesus Christ! Then we go right into another song that tells us more about anal.
Greasy?
With Keep It Greasy.
This one made me feel very uncomfortable, Paul.
Go on.
I was driving around blasting it in my car with my windows down.
Go on.
I got some looks from people when they heard some of the lyrics.
Why does this one make you uncomfortable so much, though, Joe? It really is just keep it greasy, so go down easy, roll it over, grease it down. I'll drive you through the heart of town, Joe. What's the problem here?
There's some grease on. It's not going in dry, Paul.
Yeah, um, again, this one, it's weird to me.
I feel like a prison thing should have been like a whole different concept album for him if he was going to touch this subject, I think.
And what's interesting to me on this one is the lyrics.
Focus on it more heat than the previous act. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels like it really only gets like, what, 2 songs?
Well, this is the thing that confuses me about this one, and maybe there's other Zappa fans, and I'm sure we're going to get some comments on this one. Where there's the lyrics where, hey, the good women, they sure have it tough. The good men, well, there's not enough. All the good girls are looking all the time. Good men is something that they can't find. Because if they find one miraculously, they try to be loving as they can be. If they find one and let them go, chances are they'll never find one no more. Like, there's not even discussion about this. It's more like he's discussing the fact that women are putting up with sexual deviances because they think they have a good guy. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, the tone and everything about this song matches absolutely nothing on the album. So to me, this one is, like, you hear about the filler, like, this is filler. Again, without the central scrutinizer stuff, even the lyrics at this point go against the story of the prison.
Yeah. Again, like, it loses me after track 8.
Yeah, well, it doesn't lose me fully, but, I get it where it does with you. Like I said, we'll go down this a little bit.
Like, the music's strong, but the story kind of just falls apart for me.
Yeah, the music is strong, and the story does go these weird way. Now you get Outside Now. And this is where I feel like it starts to come back around. Like, Zappa has gotten focus again. It's just so funny to me, this line right here, and I always giggle when I hear it. These executives have bluked the fuck out of me. What? like you're using such a, like a 60s sitcom word for fucked, which is bluked, and then you go right into bluked the fuck out. Like, Jesus Christ, it's funny to me. He goes back to the second song, which is Joe's Garage. He wants to get back to where he's gone. Basically, this is what Zappa felt was more autobiographical, where when he's talking about getting fucked over here, he's talking about the system fucking him per se, and how he would just sit in there and in this prison and write music in his head and just try and keep himself, busy with this music in his head. And it's just him wanting to get out. And, so now we're starting to get back into where it is. And we get out of prison. We get in the Act 3, Joe, with he used to cut the grass.
Yeah. The neighbor returns.
The neighbor return in his head, no less.
Yeah.
So at this point,
that much of a biatch.
That much of a biatch.
She broke up his band.
She called the boss. She was a fucking Karen.
I'd like to speak to the manager.
I'd like to speak to your manager, please. So at this point, Joe gets out. We don't know how long Joe's been in prison, but I'm guessing if he destroyed a nuclear pansexual robo-bluker, he was in jail for a long time because of nuclear. And at this point, music has been illegal. And basically the only music you're getting are loading zones at airports, which has always been kind of a thing, So, and Joe starts to write music in his head. And even while he's writing music in his head, you're starting to see the thoughts and as the Pink Floyd would have called it, the worms in his head, kind of, beating him down, because now he's even hearing the neighbor and what she said about him and what other people were saying about him. And you see that in the next song, Packard Goose,
mm-hmm.
Which is really, at this point, this is Zappa breaking the fourth wall in the album, right? Like, he is calling out Rolling Stone magazine. He's calling out the government. He is calling out everyone. calling out journalism as a whole. Joe, what do you feel about Packard Goose?
It's just like it. This part of the album, this last tail of the album, like musically strong, but it loses me, loses my attention. Like I don't. Another one of my complaints with the Zappa is it's oftentimes very exhausting.
Yes, I mean it's 2.5 hours.
This is a really good album, but it is exhausting.
Completely, Joe. I mean, it's 2.5 hours long. It's fucking exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So by the time I got to this, I'm just like, I just want this to end. Like this should not have been a triple album.
It's tough. Absolutely, absolutely. And but I will say,
and the tracks get longer too, which doesn't really help with that.
Well, you start getting into more of the jamming,
the jamming and
the solo work, which is some of Zappa's, in my opinion, best solo work. Honestly,
yeah, it's really good. Again,
it's fucking great.
It feels like it's just padding it out to hit that triple album.
Yeah,
to fill out the grooves on the LP.
A little bit, Joe. And again, there's people on Reddit, fans that will agree with you on that. So those of that come at me, go to the fucking Reddit and, come at Joe, go to the fucking Reddit and look, there's people who agree with this sentiment. One of the things I will say that Packard Goose has done is this is where one of Zappa's, what I feel is most used quote comes from, which is information is not knowledge. Knowledge is not wisdom. Wisdom is not truth. Truth is not beauty. Beauty is not love. Love is not music. Music is the best. Wisdom is the domain of wits, which is extinct. Then people usually lay off the beauty of French phonetic corruption of a short cloth neck ornament currently in resurgence. People usually leave that part off of it because it's more profound.
Yeah. It's like the Second Amendment, you just forget about the last part of it.
The well-regulated militia. Yeah, absolutely.
Never heard of that part, Paul.
We don't talk about that. We found something written in like some book that someone wrote that you can't look at that says that that's not what it meant. Jesus Christ. So yes, that is something that's become, I think, a very famous thing, and we get that actually from Mary, who comes back into his head because remember, it's the girl from the bus. Remember last tour, which is trying to throw back to the old album, right? And I think this was Zappa trying to be clever, like, hey, there's a song, from like 6 months ago, throwing these things and these nods back to this album because it wasn't all packaged together at the same part. Then we get what is my favorite song on the album, Joe, which is Watermelon in Easter Hay. I adore this. And after Frank Zappa's death and over the years, Watermelon in Easter Hay has become arguably one of the most loved songs, guitar solo work of Zappa, to the point where even Dweezil Zappa says it's the best one, that Frank felt it was the best one he ever did.
Yeah, it's incredible.
This is an incredible song. Like, this to me alone is worth the price of admission. It is just everything that's going on in it, the guitar work, the bass work, the drum work, everything on this one just works. And again, there's nothing to it other than the central scrutinizer where he fucks up and starts laughing.
Yep. You won't do that. Well, why does it hurt when I pee? But
Yep.
He's doing the weird central scrutinizer. He starts laughing.
He doesn't sing
with the L. Ron Hoover line.
Nope, he doesn't sing it with the L. Ron Hoover line. He doesn't sing it when he's singing Blowjob, but he does it here. And what's funny to me is, again, I can get this. Like, I can say the reason why I think this song resonates for me is I remember this feeling for me as a musician when I realized that my band was never going to make another song together. Like, this is something that I went through in terms of this exact thing that he's talking about, where the guitar notes and imaginary vocals exist only in the mind of the imaginer. So he goes back to his ugly little room and quietly dreams of his last imaginary guitar solo. So I think that's part of it to me. Like this song to me, just in a general whole, even the Sentinel Scrutinizer stuff resonates. But this is also in the line of the story where Joe is resigned. He is taken his beatings, he's taken society, and he is now beaten in a way that Zappa feels religion and government are cookie cutter stamping us. And Pink Floyd touched on this in very different ways, but it's no different than The Wall in terms of the beatings that we get through life where we end up at this spot. We are just resigned and give up.
Yeah, it reminded me actually more of the end of 1984.
Yeah.
Winston Smith leaves the torture, and he's so broken that he finally loves Big Brother. That's kind of like the vibes I got with this.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. That's really good. And then you get Little Green Rosetta.
This is good. I like it. This is a good way to end the album for me.
It's a great way to end the album. And the one thing that I like the Sentinel Scrutinizer is he goes, as you can see, music can get you pretty fucked up. Yeah. Take a tip from Joe, do what he did. And this is really, get a job at a factory and don't fucking think and just do what we tell you. Yeah. Like this is truly the nail on the head to the album. And this is really what what Zappa is saying. I keep saying Joe. What Zappa is saying is they're blaming music for all these other things that is just repression that religion and government are putting on everyone. And then blaming people for reacting to these things and then getting beat down more.
I actually think it's also part autobiographical of how he felt with the music industry.
100%.
Yes. Like really fuck you up. I mean, his widow just passed away not too long ago. And like, that's why his estate, the Zappa estate was sold because he didn't want his family in the music business anymore.
Yep.
Like,
no, he didn't.
Was her name Gail?
Was it?
I'm not sure, but like, from what I read, it was kind of like, that's why they sold, like, his catalog and all that from like, my understanding is Frank didn't want his family to have to deal with that bullshit anymore.
Okay, because
basically take the money and run sort of situation.
Because I know there was the trust, because they restarted a trustee at a couple years, like 10 years after he died.
His catalog was just sold like a few weeks ago.
Absolutely, yes, it was. Yes, just a few weeks ago it was sold.
Yeah.
So this
like
really
this and all that shit. Yeah, it was basically get out and get your money and get out, and they did apparently.
Yeah, and this was part of also the fight that Dweezil was having with Ahmed and all that stuff that we talked about last time.
We don't need to get into all that shit. I'm not even privy to all that. And that's way too much information. And again, this album's getting pretty exhausted.
Yeah.
And like I'm getting exhausted talking about
Well, we've been at it.
I feel like I aged 100 years talking about Frank Zappa.
Well, Joe, and we've been talking for an hour and a half on this 2.5 hour fucking album. So
well, it would have been padded out if we had some guitar solos, Paul.
I could, God damn it.
Why don't you map some guitar solos?
I'll map some guitar solos in this one. Yeah, sure, I can do that. So that is, in a nutshell,
Joe's Garage. Let's. One thing I want to touch on with Little Green Rosetta, because I feel like people won't, if we don't bring it up, they're not going to say it. There's
Hey,
this part
Paul,
where,
just piss them off.
well,
Just piss them off.
uh,
They're already going to be mad at us anyway because we talked about Frank Zappa.
well, I would have just bring this up is that there's a part where he is somewhat improvising towards the end there, and he's talking. You could tell, oh, this is for the third world people, and this is for the Taiwan people who got chumped. This course is for you. Rang tang ding dong. I'm the Japanese Sandman. Take 8. Wow. Okay, Zappa. Not exactly, again, sign of the times. He talks about, the people in the fourth world. So, again, throwing the record away and that type of thing. And people go, oh my God, but you got to understand again, what he's also pointing out is when he says for the third world, and he's talking about France and Spain and Mongolia and Taiwan, there was this push at the time that there was concerns that the government and religion was really cracking down on music as a whole around this time as well. So it wasn't like him, like it's not a Trumpism of being like shithole country. It was him pointing out the politics of them going after music. So, and lyrics. Okay, there. Now I'm done. Joe.
All right, Paul.
Yeah, Joe. Would you recommend Joe's Garage?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, for me, like it's over. Again, it's exhausting. My favorite part is the first 8 songs. If that makes me an amateur, or whatever, so be it.
No, I don't.
But yeah, I like it. I like it. We're like, whatever. Take your wins, Zappa fans. If somebody likes one song, you should be happy.
I also recommend the album. Now, again, as I do with everything, I always recommend things with a caveat. You're getting into a concept album. This is something that is going to, like, you're not going to want to kind of put this on shuffle. You are, especially the first couple of album, like the first 8 songs, those ones are easy to blow through. It's 40 minutes. It's, you're on a drive to work, blow through it. Then get into Act 2 maybe and blow through that, which is another 38 minutes. And then you got another 38 minutes. So yeah, it's just.
But if you just want to like hear songs, just listen to like Joe's Garage, Catholic Girls. Why Does It Hurt When I Pee? Like, I mean, those are songs you can put on a mix.
Yeah, Lucille,
yeah.
Yeah, you could put that. Yeah, you could put those ones on a mix.
Those absolutely. Are like those songs are strong enough to stand on their own without the concept.
And I will say, Watermelon Easter Hay goes on every one of my playlists, every one of my mixes. Watermelon and Easter Hay is on there. Yeah. To me, that is the pinnacle of Zappa. Like when people say, "Why do you like Zappa?" I go, Watermelon and Easter Hay. That is why I'm a Zappa fan, is because of his ability to create music like that. So yeah, do I think Zappa is a very talented musician? Yes. Do I understand why he never got mainstream? Fuck yeah.
Yeah, it's very apparent.
It's very apparent. And Zappa fans, you should realize why that was.
Yeah. It's not for everybody.
It's not for everybody.
Like,
and the thing is that what I do commend Zappa. It's just like John Lennon, right? John Lennon, we talked about this, where there's things I agree with, but he was a fuckhead in other instances. I completely agree with Zappa on his take on modern music, on modern religion. I completely agree with his thought that, hey, why are we only having in America songs that are 4 minutes, always the same thing? It's boom, boom, boom. There's no thought. There's no real artistic to it. Why are we not allowing world music into, why are we not having Arabic music? Why are we not having South African music? Why are we not having Spanish music?
He said that, and then the 80s was full of it. So
yeah.
Graceland, one of the best-selling albums of all time.
Sure.
Just saying, Peter Gabriel.
Yes, but those were
like
Peter Gabriel was also from Europe, sir. So that doesn't, yeah. But Paul Simon, for sure, he brought in some African music, but really it never really came over. I mean, we had hip hop and things like that, which I definitely would call, of African
origin, obviously, with the beats and things like that, and the beats that were used in a lot of it, especially in the beginning. Excuse me. But no, I mean, we never did. I mean, the most we got was, what was that song? Whatever that one was.
Did Sting do a lot of world music?
Again,
I think the criticism here with, like, it was wildly popular in the United States. I think this is just nitpicking on him. And again, it's like these bands who like did this with world music were wildly popular.
I don't. Okay, I somewhat disagree, because again, they were popular in terms of their groups, like Peter Gabriel. Yeah, okay, In Your Eyes, fantastic. But Red Brain never got any play. Other things didn't get any play. So there was this thing out there where it was like, okay, this is a good song, we can't deny it. You know, Toto with Africa, right? Okay, had a little bit of world music in there, but again, all there was. And then when they came around with these other ones, it wasn't really pushed a whole lot. So I think his point was it's like 10%, and the rest was, you know, he felt it was punk, then he felt it was butt rock, then he felt it was heavy metal, you know, that there was just this, it was just all derivative of the same cloth, is what his criticism was.
He was an advert capitalist, and that's what the market demanded, Paul.
There you go. You know, so take it for what it is.
It's a way of life.
It's a way of life. You'll love it. Joe. All right. Fuck my life. That was a lot to go down. Joe, what?
I remember when Joe peed on that robot.
That was such good times. When he,
that'll be the one thing that stands out for me on this album.
Yeah, is when he
it was like at the end of Pink Flamingo's Divine eating the dog shit. Like just some things that just always stick out.
Yeah, or the chicken fucking. Yeah, with John Waters. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it was really good when he peed on that. When he peed on the
poor robot.
The magical pig.
Dildos on it.
The dildos on it that looked like an industrial vacuum combined with a pig. I fucking love the imagery, because you can exactly picture it, like this chrome thing. Yeah. So Joe, what's going on at the Joe Down? I said Joe a lot this album.
We're reviewing, I think our next movie is Air Bud. It's sports month, so.
For fuck's sake, yeah. Yep.
So we'll be doing that.
And I told you before, that's a well you can keep going down. So you got Air Bud. Jesus Christ on a crutch. All right. All right.
I mean, there's no robot fucking in that.
It's missing out. And I'm sorry, I keep saying the album was 2.5 hours. It's an hour and it's an hour and a half. I apologize.
Yeah, I was wondering why you kept saying it was 2 hours.
Yeah, no, I did. It's an hour and a half, and I apologize for that. So there's a correction right there.
Well, according to Amazon Music, it's an hour and 55 minutes.
Okay, hour and 55 minutes, and we've been going on for about an hour and 55 minutes on this.
Yeah. We didn't even have any solo guitar solos.
Don't worry, I'll add one in there.
Just start patching them in there.
I got some stuff that I've worked on over the years I could throw in there. It'd be kind of funny. Joe, what are we doing next week?
What are we doing next week?
Well, what are we doing next week?
Zappa, this album, he takes swings at the record industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go with a person of a newer generation who has stood up to a record label and kind of fucking flipped it on its head. From an kind of a surprising source, next week we are going to be doing Red, Taylor's version by Taylor Swift.
Ooh, interesting.
Taylor's version because, and we'll get into it, she couldn't get the masters back for the original album, so she decided to re-record it and own those masters, and those masters are now considered the definitive versions of her songs.
Oh, that's fantastic. Good for her.
Yep.
All right.
Something I think Zappa would have been proud of.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, I'm interested. I've not heard this. So I'm excited to actually listen to it. So we're going to do
Yeah, I don't know if you'll like it, but it's definitely an interesting thing behind the scenes.
Yeah. I'm fascinated to hear the story and get into it. No, you know what? I mean, I've broadened myself, you know. I mean, we did Miley, we've done Beyonce. Amanda Lear was my favorite female artist that we've done so far.
Oh, that beautiful ashtray voice.
Oh my gosh, that awesome disco concept album. See, you think I'm addicted to white music? I'm addicted to concept albums, Joe. That's my problem.
That Lindsey Buckingham wasn't a concept album, pal.
You know what? If you give me another hour and a half, I'll make it a concept album. I'll talk you into the fact that it was a concept album. All right, buddy. Well, fuck. All right, this has been a long one. Do you want to take us out?
No.
This has been Rate That Album with Paul Muad'Dib and Joe Fremming. Thank you for listening.